I am Dustin Baker, and this is VikesNow, the Thursday, June 23rd edition. And the moment Kyle Rudolph was released by the Giants, I knew this episode eventually happened because the drum would be beat on bringing him back to the Vikings. And alas, he was on Paul Allen's show, was it 2 days ago, and was point blank asked if he would like to rejoin the Vikings, and he answered, yes, I would. So, unsurprisingly, he's become a Minnesota lifer, at least for where he lives. And yeah, he wants a piece of these Vikings, these Zimmerless Vikings of 2022. So yes, this, because Vikings fans, you probably do absolutely love reunions with former players. I knew this topic was inevitable. Alas, it is here in the digital stratosphere, so we're going to talk about it for about 15 minutes. The reason I titled this show a Rudolph reunion isn't about his nostalgia is because there is a practical need for Rudolph if indeed he signs on the dotted line. The short answer is that the Vikings would be wise to re-sign their tight end who was employed here for a decade. And it's not because you get the warm fuzzies that Rudy's coming home or something. You know, we do this all the time to bring back Jarius Wright, or 2 years ago when Percy Harvin was like running in the parking garage, people were like, why don't we bring him back for a look? Or, let's get Josh Klein on this roster. We always do this. Every offseason we fantasize about bringing former players back. I don't do it, but this one I understand because there is a need for Rudolph, and that's what we're going to get into. So the short answer is that I believe the Vikings, aside from his decade tenure with the team, there is a spot for Rudolph, and I'm going to explain why. Here is the deal. If you remember nothing else from this episode, consider this. The Vikings employ a skimpy tight end room as of June 23rd, which is led by a tight end who's coming back from a pretty serious leg injury, and that's Irv Smith Jr. and a torn meniscus. Took him forever to heal back from it. Meniscuses, if they're always so weird. In the NBA, sometimes you can be back in a few weeks. With Irv Smith, it was like an absolute no-brainer when he got hurt that he was gone for the season. So I never understand what the meniscus injuries mean in the first place. But this one was dire, and he missed an entire third season of a career for it. But this is what I want you to remember, is the tight end room right now, even though there's a bunch of dudes, Irv Smith, Johnny Munt, Ben Ellefson, Zach Davidson, and Nick Muse, there are a lot of guys, but it's real top-heavy with Irv Smith and the boys after him. So I think the fear is that something happens, a re-injury happens to Irv Smith Jr., and then what? You consult free agency, because I don't know if Johnny Munt is going to do the trick, and you say, oh, there's Eric Ebron, or oh, there's Jimmy Graham, or bada bing, there's Kyle Rudolph. So signing him now, after he proclaimed he'd like to come back to the Vikings, gets out ahead of that. It hedges the bet that if something happens to Irv Smith this summer, this September, this December, you don't have breadcrumbs after Smith. So for that reason alone, if you want to turn off the episode, it gets the Vikings deeper at an important spot on the field, which is tight end. And the incumbent guy who's going to have his breakout season finally is missed the entire season because of injury. So they should have a sensible plan behind him. And right now, in my opinion, they don't, unless Munt turns into the next big thing. So yeah, it's basically a then what happened if Irv Smith gets hurt. And for that reason, having Rudolph, who you intimately know can catch the football and score touchdowns in the red zone, is a viable insurance policy. The Vikings are sort of absent of a big red zone threat as Adam Thielen's career has progressed in 2019, 2020, and 2021. He's become the Rudolph, the red zone threat. I think he scored the third most touchdowns in the last two seasons among wide receivers. So Thielen has slid into that role, but for a big-bodied threat in the red zone, it's always been Rudolph outside of last year. And so they don't really have it. They have good receivers who can catch the football, but not a guy that has the nickname Red Zone Reindeer. And I think for that reason, a reunion also makes sense, is that you need somebody to catch 2-yard touchdowns, and Rudolph does that with proficiency. So the long game on Rudolph is he'll be 33 in November, so he's probably dancing through his last 2 or 3 years in the NFL, assuming he gets signed this summer by somebody. This is a short-term thing. It's not going to inhibit the growth of Irv Smith Jr. It's not going to steal anybody's spot other than like Tyler Muse, or I always call him Tyler Muse, Nick Muse, who's a rookie. And so we know what we're getting. It would be a 1 or 2 year plan as a bet hedge against Irv Smith Jr. If something happens to Irv, you'd have somebody that the offense knows very, very well in Kyle Rudolph. One of the really, really bizarre hesitations about him, or something that came up a year ago, 15 months ago, was Kyle Rudolph in the Players Tribune wrote that 2,000-word farewell address to all Vikings fans. And he didn't specifically name drop Kirk Cousins, so multiple media entities in Minneapolis ran with it that he doesn't care for Kirk. And I, for the life of me, I don't understand why we pounce on these narratives that so-and-so doesn't like so-and-so because so-and-so didn't say their name. Or even during the regular season when Justin Jefferson gets pissed that he didn't, get targeted on the play. We're like, oh, he hates Cousins. And we manufacture this very strange resentment that's not even there in the first place. So Rudolph authors 2,000 words about thanks to the Vikings, mentions Sam Bradford and Teddy Bridgewater, two of his close friends, we find out on the Paul Allen show, but didn't say anything about Cousins. So therefore, according to some semi-credible people, he's got beef with Cousins. I don't know why we have to have a soap opera mindset like that. I sure as shit don't. Some do. But nevertheless, unsurprisingly, Rudolph was talking to Paul Allen, went out of his way to compliment Kirk, and said that he has absolutely no beef with him whatsoever, and that all of the hubbub from last year in the Players Tribune was made up. It was manufactured. It was a lie. It was a false conspiracy theory. So always be on watch for those because they're so stupid, and I don't think they'll ever stop because we like to just drum up drama for some reason. And I mean, these two authored one of the coolest moments in Vikings recent history down in New Orleans in January 2020. And here you have some entities that are trying to tear them apart and they don't like each other because he didn't write his name in the Players Tribune. Oh, it's mind-boggling. So all in all, he said no hard feelings towards Kirk. He likes him. He thinks he's an excellent quarterback. Pretty much what everybody says after they're asked, do you have beef with Kirk Cousins? Such a strange magnet for controversy. I think one of the important distinctions for this episode, and then on the whole, especially if the Vikings sign Kyle Rudolph, is that you're not getting the Rudolph that you know and love back from 2015 or 2016 when he had 132 targets from Sam Bradford. You'd be getting a pronounced tight end 2. Whereas during the Irv Smith, Kyle Rudolph dynamic of 2019 and 2020, it was Rudolph who was the incumbent, and this Irv guy would develop in the shadows. And because Rudolph got hurt in 2020 down the stretch, then Irv kind of popped up and took over the TE1 targets, which is how it usually works when a youngster takes over. But this time, I don't want you to kid yourself that Rudolph wouldn't be coming back to get the bulk of TE targets. He would be there merely to complement Irv Smith, who has to effectuate a strong year because it's his contract year. We blinked, and Irv Smith will be a free agent in 9 months, if you can believe that. So if Rudolph comes back, it's not going to be, an every down thing like it was from 2011 to 2019 or so. He should be cheap. This shouldn't cost the Vikings a lot of money. The Vikings have about $11 million right now, which could be, some of it could be used on Dominic and Sue, could be used on a free agent to be named later, or a little bit of it could be used on Rudolph, who has told Vikings personalities that he wants to return to the team. So this isn't a landmark or groundbreaking financial transaction. This would be something a little bit more than a veteran minimum, but it won't break the bank, and that's obviously vital to how a team is constructed, especially the usually cash-strapped Vikings. On my Believe in Vikings show that I posted on this channel yesterday, Ron Saw, my dude from Eden Prairie, also talked about you can never have enough leadership guys, which is a very valid point. Rudolph is about as stand-up as they come, through and through, the community, the team, all of that. So you're not going to have too many guys that are good dudes in the locker room, and we know beyond the shadow of a doubt that Rudolph would instantly fill that role. So, on the whole, I would endorse Rudolph coming back to the roster as a matter of practicality to be a TE2, but I also won't be heartbroken if it never pans out and he just goes to the Chiefs, or I think he's from Cincinnati-ish area if he went to the Bengals to try to make a playoff run there. So I think it makes sense from football's X's and O's. I really don't give a damn that he played for the team for 10 years and I want to see him in, the purple clothes because yay nostalgia. I don't give a shit about that. He can fill a role with his legendary hands on the 2022 Vikings and especially be a contingency plan if something again happens to Irv Smith Jr. because we didn't expect anything to happen to Irv last year. Bada bing, right after the Chiefs game. He ain't playing for the rest of 2021, and thankfully for Tyler Conklin and the Vikings, Conklin emerged as a suitable TE2. And that's what the Vikings need in the event Irv misses time, is a guy where the offense doesn't careen off a cliff if the TE1 is out. So the takeaway here is that Rudolph would be an insurance policy. It just so happens we have 10 years of sample size, and you intimately know what he does and doesn't do. Right now, the insurance policy isn't quite there unless you have it on quietly good authority that Johnny Munt is all that. It's Irv Smith and dudes that you hope maybe can catch 30 balls per year. So I think adding Rudolph back, it'll be cheap. You already know what you're getting. He's a red zone target. I think it all makes sense, and I rarely endorse reunions from former Vikings because I just don't understand the thrill of bringing old guys back. But this one checks out from me. We shall see if it actually happens. I will be back tomorrow with another Vikings topic, and Skol, baby.